Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om. Peace, peace, peace and beneficence be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So once again, now good afternoon. Is there anything at all that is left over from our last week's discussion of this sutra and this book that should be discussed before we go ahead? Okay. As we have seen in considering Aphorism 15, the thought waves in the mind can only be stilled by first swallowing up the many little thought waves in one great wave, one single object of concentration. Now, if this single object of concentration is the Divine Being in any of its aspects, any of its forms or aspects, this is called Savikalpa Samadhi. All the little waves of the mind are consumed, or another way of thinking about it, are pushed to the periphery of your awareness by your focus, your single-minded focus on one single object of concentration. And so this is highly transformative in that you can no longer see yourself truly as separate from that one single object of concentration, the Divine Being. So any comments or questions or concerns about that particular aspect? Okay, there's some chat going on. Is there anything that I need to know about what's being said in that chat?
Oh, it was about the page number, Brother Shankara. Someone asked for page number and I just posted it.
Okay, very good.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. In the Upanishads, we find this process described in a slightly different and perhaps simpler manner. We are told to concentrate upon an object, any object, and to regard it as a symbol of the indwelling reality, the Atman. If we hold fast to this concept and do not let go for a moment, we shall pass beyond the object's outer coverings of appearance to the inner nature of its being, which is what I meant when I said if the single object of concentration is the Divine Being in any of its aspects, you penetrate or pass beyond the object's outer coverings, our ideas, our thoughts about it, to beyond its appearance to its inner nature. And when we do that, that is Savikalpa Samadhi. So before we go on to 42, Anything at all about what's been said so far? All right. Aphorism 42. 6 is the number of predictable change. Predictable from what's come before. You can see that this is a predictable outcome. And so the aphorism reads, when the mind achieves identity with a gross object of concentration, mixed with awareness of name, quality, and knowledge, this is called, what is that word?
Savitarka Samadhi.
Savitarka Samadhi. So I'll read that again. When the mind achieves identity with a gross object of concentration, mixed with awareness of name, quality, and knowledge, this is called Savitarka Samadhi. 43. The number of good fortune. When the mind achieves identity with a gross object of concentration, unmixed with awareness of name, quality, and knowledge, so that the object alone remains, this is called Nivitarka Samadhi. So with attributes and now without attributes, which is regarded as a higher form of good fortune. When the mind achieves identity with a gross object of concentration, unmixed with awareness of name, quality, and knowledge, so that the object alone remains, this is called Nivitarka Samadhi. All our ordinary awareness, is compounded, as Patanjali says, of name, quality, and with a small k, knowledge. Name and form, our sense, our external sense of these things. For example, when we look at a desk, we are aware, 1, of the name of the object, desk, 2, of the quality of the object, its size, shape, color, woodiness, etc. And 3, our knowledge, our own knowledge of the object. The idea that the fact that it is we ourselves who are perceiving it. So this is discrimination or buddhi, mixed with ahamkara. Through intense concentration, we may become identified with the desk and yet still retain a mixture of name, quality, and knowledge in the mind. Through intense concentration, we may become identified with the desk and yet still remain a mixture of name, quality, and knowledge in the mind. This is the lowest kind of samadhi, known as savitarka, which means with deliberation. With deliberation. We think about it. We deliberate on it. We contemplate it. The term savitarka is only applied when the object of concentration belongs to the order of the gross elements, the most external order of phenomena. Is that clear to everyone? This is everything outside of us, that including our bodies and everything associated with our bodies, is part of these gross elements, the external order of phenomena. Somebody has their mic open, and
Yes, Hari Om Shankaraji, that's me.
okay, Balakrishna.
I just wanted to see, through intense concentration, we may become identified with the desk. What exactly the Swami means? That means we lose our identity with only we realize dusk. That's it. We don't realize our body, mind, and everything.
And that's why it's called samadhi. Yes, we at that point we are aware only of desk, but in Savitarka we're aware of its name, qualities, and our knowledge of it. But we have lost for that moment. It may last many moments, but at least for that moment, we've lost our identification with our body-mind complex, our antakara.
Okay.
Does that clarify it?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. And when you experience that, it's very clear. But not while you're experiencing it, only afterwards. Oh, I wasn't aware of time, space, and causation during those moments. I wasn't aware of my body. I wasn't aware of the limits of my body, the feelings of my body. This is what happens when we master Pratyahara. And that is I think the fourth step, or fourth limb of yoga, fourth or fifth. I'm losing my ability to keep those things straight quite. So I have to stop and count them before I get it right. But in any event, that is the step of losing identification with sense objects outside of us and knowing only the sense objects within us. And then ultimately, we lose our identity with that too, which is what will be dealt with next. Anything else?
Brother Shankaras.
Yes. Yes, Sumesh.
I really like when you said like anything outside us, which is our body. And when I started thinking, it is like anything I know of myself is also a quality that I have created. It's not me. Like if I want to be with me, then everything I know is probably when I relate with that is Savitarka Samadhi and not
Yes, exactly. And it is because you're still identified with your upadis, your limiting adjuncts.
Yes.
And but if you go into samadhi, you lose even savitarka, the lowest form, as the Swami says. If you go into that savitarka samadhi, that identification with the object itself, and of course, Patanjali recommends that you not just focus on a desk, but on something higher, so that your identification becomes with that, because that has transformative capacity when you're identified with something higher. But and even with your knowledge, even savitarka samadhi of a divine being or divine form will be transformative. It isn't the same as Savikalpa samadhi, but it is still very auspicious. So you're right, Somesh.
Thank you.
Anything else from anyone?
This is the first.
Yes,
Yeah,
Jeff.
this is the first I've heard Savitarka and Nirvitarka, but you say they're not equivalent to Savikalpa and Nirvikalpa Samadhi?
No. Well, Savikalpa samadhi is the lower form of the two deeply spiritual samadhis. we're still dealing with mental phenomena here, which edges over into the psychic, which is why Swami Vivekananda calls Raja Yoga the yoga of psychic control. But when you achieve Savikalpa Samadhi means you've lost all sense of self-identity, except there is still this feeling of, instead of being totally unified with the object of concentration, you feel as if you are still experiencing that, and somehow you are a part of it. Nirvikalpa Samadhi cannot be described, cannot be discussed, because there is no mind there. You have left even the experiencer behind. When you say you, who is the you? The Atman, the the Nirguna Atman, the Atman without attributes. So we can say these words, we can gesture at this, but we really don't have any idea what it means until that realization comes. So what Swami Prabhavananda used to say with great emphasis is, when people wanted to talk to him about Nirvikalpa Samadhi, he'd say, well, first achieve Savikalpa Samadhi, then we'll talk about Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Because at least in Savikalpa Samadhi, you have a knowledge, a direct empirical experience of what it means to leave everything behind except the experiencer itself, the ahamkara, the buddhi ahamkara compound, which is the highest. This is the causal body, or anandamaya kosha of us. When we're totally identified with the anandamaya kosha, then we have no awareness of anything except that. That's Savikalpa. And the Swami will get to this, and his explanation of it will be even fuller and more thoughtful than what you've just been offered. Thank you, Brahmadas. Anything else? Okay. In the samadhi called nirvitarka, without deliberation, we reach a higher stage. Our achievement of identity with the object of concentration is now unmixed with awareness of the quality of name, quality, and knowledge. In other words, it is just the thing in itself. No longer our contemplation and the results of our contemplation or deliberation on it. Or to put it in another way, we are at last able to still the thought waves, which are our reactions to the object. Reactions, name, qualities, knowledge of it. We are able to still the thought waves, which are our reactions to the object, and to know nothing but the object itself as it truly is, the thing in itself, to use Kant's famous term, the Ding an sich, the thing in itself. Kant maintained, quite rightly, that the thing in itself cannot possibly be known by the senses or the reasoning mind, since the senses and the reason can only present us with their own subjective reactions. Subjective, name, quality, our knowledge of it, our deliberations on it, and so on. But they're not the thing in itself. It means it remains completely unknown to us, he wrote. What objects may be by themselves and apart from the receptivity of our senses. We know nothing but our manner of perceiving them, their manner of being peculiar to us and not necessarily shared by every being. In other words, if we look at a sunset, each of us sees a different sunset. Why? Because we're seeing it in terms of all the other sunsets we've ever seen. It isn't until we achieve this nirvikarka samadhi that we can perceive that sunset apart from our knowledge of sunset. This is then experiencing the thing in itself. And it is very, this is sung of by poets, this experience. Wordsworth comes to mind. Any thoughts or comments or questions from your own wisdom or experience, or any concern or question? Okay. Kant, who did not admit the validity of any experience other than that of the senses or the reason, was therefore forced to conclude that the thing in itself is unknowable. Here, Patanjali disagrees with him. Patanjali tells us that there is a higher kind of knowledge, a transcendental knowledge beyond sense perception, by which the thing in itself can be known. And this is, of course, the fundamental claim made by the practicing mystics of every religion, which is why I said, you can hear it in the voices of the poets and saints. The fact that you can know the thing in itself. If you read the poets of love poems that are published as love poems from God, you'll find that each of them talks in one way or another about this very thing, knowing the thing in itself and how overwhelming it becomes. Rumi talks about how he becomes drunk, so that he has to walk with two canes, he says, because of a pine cone hanging from a tree and the peach fuzz floating in the air. Because he knows these things in themselves, and the knowledge of them, the knowledge of their inner nature and the truth of them is so overwhelming. He falls into this divine madness that he calls a kind of drunkenness. And Sri Ramakrishna also mentions that kind of drunkenness, particularly in his relationship with the divine beings, especially with Mother Kali. So before we move on to 44, anything from anyone? Okay. 44. When the object of concentration is a subtle object, two kinds of samadhi, called savichara and nivichara may be distinguished in the same manner. When the object of concentration is a subtle object, two kinds of samadhi called savichara and nivichara may be distinguished in the same manner. That is to say, when we are dealing with objects of concentration belonging to the orders of subtle or essential phenomena, see Aphorism 17 of this chapter, we must still distinguish between the higher and lower kinds of samadhi. Savichara, reflective. Savichara. Chara means reflection. With reflection, savichara, reflective samadhi, is samadhi upon a subtle object, which is mixed with awareness of name, quality, and knowledge. Nivichara, super reflective samadhi, is samadhi upon a subtle object, which is unmixed with such awareness.
Brother Shankara, this is Jeff.
Yes, Jeff.
Can you talk about what a subtle object is?
The contents of your waking awareness, your active subconscious, and later on your latent subconscious. You will see these, you will perceive these when you are doing your contemplation, concentration, and meditation. These contents of your waking awareness, which are called Samskaras, will come to your attention. You have a samskara, which may be referred to as a knot of the heart, because of some relationship you had in the past. That something in that relationship caused you either great pain or great joy. You know about the pain, you know about the joy. These are the name, quality, and knowledge of that subtle. By subtle, it means it's not. There is no now in this present moment any gross appearance of it. It exists only within your mind. Now, this has many, many, many dimensions and may include your spiritual experiences, your experiences of divine beings or divine states of awareness. These are all subtle things. They have no outward manifestation, no gross manifestation. So that's also every gross object has its subtle manifestation also. If we just go back to the idea of desk. Now we're not talking about a particular desk. We're talking about this subtle concept of deskness. Okay, does that get it for you, Jeff?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Brother, so if we imagine, like we close our eyes and imagine something in the heart, that is a subtle thing, right? Even though there might
No
be like a
question.
photo or something.
Yes, no question. If there's a photo outside, that's the gross aspect. When we imagine it in our hearts or within our waking awareness, then that definitely is a subtle representation of this, a subtle manifestation of it. Yes.
And Brother Shankara, would all our thoughts count as subtle or specific?
Yes. All our thoughts are nothing more than the effect of the gunas on our samskaras. If you think about your samskaras as a field of wind chimes, just this vast field of wind chimes, and the gunas as breezes that come through and ring these chimes. Sattva will make pleasant and very uplifting noises when they ring the wind chimes of your mind. Rajas will make a like the opening chord of a Beethoven concerto. Dong! It'll make this very strong reaction from the subtle contents of your mind. And then there's samskaras. And then tamas, it'll be like somebody rang a lead bell. Dum. As the Monty Python joke says, what's brown and sounds like a bell? Dung. So this is, this is, yes, emphatically, our thoughts are subtle. We may take those thoughts and turn them into something gross. This is the effect of rajas, is to project the subtle to the gross, and this is the positive aspect of rajas. There is no such thing as a painting, a song, composed song, a sculpture, without that projecting power of rajas that gives it form. So, this is if we just continue to think about the gunas in terms of our thoughts and in terms of the effects of our thoughts, we get some insight into the operations and functions of the gunas, as Sri Krishna says. And if we do that enough and long enough, we become free from attachment to the things that are going on as the gunas, because we see that they are completely independent of our what produces them and what produces us as beings is gross and subtle aspects of us is completely independent of us. It is the divine being functioning through the gunas, as Krishna says.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, Swayam.
Since we are talking about sanskaras, I don't know if I'm even asking this question right, but sanskaras, do they constitute every individual tendency, or is like a subtotal or a collection of tendencies?
Well, the Sanskrit term for the collection of samskaras that result in a particular tendency, say the tendency to overindulge in something, whether it be food or just to be immoderate about anything. I particularly think of food because that's something that I was very much subject to at one time. A collection of them is called a vasana, a collection of samskaras that represent a habitual way of being. so that when when one of those samskaras is touched, the whole series of them is triggered. If you want to understand this in some great depth, read Jill Bolte Taylor's book, My Stroke of Insight, and what she has to say about what she calls neural loops. Neural loops are her words for samskaras, and collections of them. She doesn't have a separate word that I recall for a collection that results in a particular habit. But there was a time, for example, when it was very difficult for me to drive by a stand that sold soft ice cream. It was just very hard for me not to stop and get some. There's a whole series of things I could say about why. What difference does that make? But that collection of samskaras that led to that habit is called a vasana. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Brother Shankara. Thank you.
But is there more? Is there something behind the question?
No, that's basically what. Let me contemplate on that a little bit more, and then I will maybe contact you separately.
Okay.
Thank you.
But just remember that our habits, a particular habit is usually not composed, or I can't imagine that it would be composed of a single samskara. It's composed of a bunch of associated samskaras all around some particular. And we can have good habits as well as bad habits. So it's not that the samskaras are inherently bad. No, how can that possibly be? All of our goodness is composed of samskaras, as well as all of our inauspicious behaviors, all of our auspiciousness, all of our inauspiciousness. And sometimes they're very mixed, as we'll see when we practice contemplation, concentration, and meditation. And we begin to encounter all of these things, as they're the things that interrupt us as we're trying to practice our concentration. So we become intimately acquainted with them over time, over years. Anything else from anyone?
Brother, what is the fastest way to dissolve a particular samskara that's troubling you?
You don't dissolve them, dear. You simply stop watering them with your attention, and they become dormant. This is what we're told by Patanjali and the Upanishads. You stop watering them with your attention. When they arise, you simply don't yield to the behavior or the thought patterns that arise out of that samskara. You turn your attention elsewhere. You ask yourself, what deserves my attention? Does this deserve my attention, or is there something more auspicious that deserves my attention? As you turn your attention elsewhere, and you don't water that samskara with your attention, slowly and slowly it becomes dormant. It's said that with final realization, all these samskaras, these past samskaras, are burnt to ashes. They will no longer trouble us. And again, if you want to know the details of this, read the last 2 chapters of Adi Shankaracharya's Vivekachudamani, the crest jewel of discrimination, in which he describes this burning to ashes of all of the past samskaras, except those that are your prarabdha karma, that represent themselves as the karma that brought you into this lifetime. If after that final realization you remain embodied, then that prarabdha karma, the samskaras associated with that, will continue to manifest themselves. And so Prarabdha karma is resistant to this. And he says it is the final. And Swami Vivekananda talks about it too at the end of this book that we're studying, his version of it, which is called Raja Yoga. And Swami Prabhavananda talks about it too, but from a somewhat different perspective, a more one that leans in a more practical direction than Vivekananda's final instructions. So don't water them with your attention, Rajiv. That's turn your attention elsewhere when they arise. Does that get it?
Yes, brother.
Good. Okay.
Brother Shankara, when you say don't water your sanskara, I mean, in reality, it's like don't water the thoughts that that come from the sanskara. We don't want, right? It's actually the thoughts that we are talking about in practical terms. Because I don't know which sanskara is bringing that thought.
The samskara may just trigger behavior.
Mm-hmm.
It seems mindless, you know.
Yes.
It's instinctive. This is we think of it as instinctive. You know, so there may not be a whole lot of thoughts associated with it. There may be very many thoughts associated with other samskaras, particularly those groups of samskaras called avasana. There's probably lots of thoughts associated with that, lots of experiences and therefore thoughts. But what happens when we encounter one of these things that produces an instinctive reaction? We restrain ourselves from doing it, which is part of what Patanjali will talk to us about when he talks about the yamas. We restrain ourselves from that, and so we don't water that reactive, that instinctive reaction with our attention or our behavior. Instead, what? We go to some higher, building a higher samskara through what he calls the niyamas. The niyamas are observances. If you have some tendency toward some impure behavior, you replace that with thoughts and practices of purity. And of course, this is all done, this yamas and niyamas, they're not something you do separately. None of these first 6 steps are essentially something you do separately. They're not sequential. They are something that you learn to practice integratively. It's, you know, this is one of the reasons why the term integrative yoga or integral yoga arose. So watering things with our attention means not allowing ourselves to behave in what would be characteristically an instinctive way. Somebody says something insulting to us, our face gets red and we get reactive.
Yes.
There's no thought in that. Jill Bolte Taylor says, what has happened has resulted in, the reason your face gets red, the reason you have the feelings that you have, is because a neurochemical has been released in your brain, in your nervous system. A neurochemical has been released. The secret, the great secret that she reveals to us is that neurochemical will degrade to a harmless and non-reactive substance in 90 seconds. So if you can restrain yourself from reacting for 90 seconds, you can not manifest that behavior. How do you do this? Well, if you have a mantra, you can count your mantra 100 times or 108 times. You can simply just do that. But what my grandfather, who represented the folk wisdom of the West Virginia hillbillies, said, if you get angry, just count to 100 and then do what you think is right. Now that's, if you count to 100, you will have exhausted the effect of that neurochemical. That 90 seconds will be over. So this is folk wisdom that says exactly the same thing. Does that get it, Somesh?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Brother, the other thing I found is like if we closely monitor our thoughts, we can understand like a modus operandi. Like, if we consider a typical thief who gets into the house every day and creates nuisance, like how does he get in and what is the thief's modus operandi? If you think in those terms, sometimes you can recognize it much earlier, because sometimes some of this sanskara seems to be so entrenched that you can't even recognize. Like they're very subtle. Like you cannot even like hold
Those,
yourself.
those are the ones in your active and latent subconscious. Yes. And they're very hard to recognize until you are willing to admit them. That's one of the difficulties. We oftentimes do not want to admit the truth of what exists within us, and completely ignoring the fact that we too are part of Maya, which has its bright side, its gray side, and its black side. So we manifest that darkness as well. And to come in contact with some wonderful thinking on this particular aspect of humanity and our what's in our latent subconscious and manifests in our active subconscious and in our waking awareness. Read Barbara Brown Taylor's book, Learning to Walk in the Dark. Learning to Walk in the Dark. Oh my God, what a beautiful meditation that is on this particular aspect. And its wonders as well as its dreadful aspects. So you're quite right, Reggie. There are aspects of ourselves that are very hard for us to bring to bear, to even come to where we can decide to water them with our attention or not. They're just so sneaky, as you say, like a thief entering the house. That's why the three gunas are called the three robbers. I mean, that's one of the names for them in Sanskrit, is the three robbers. They rob us of our ability to react auspiciously, even sattva. Anything else? Okay, dears. This is 45 now. Again, I remind you, 45 is 9, the most auspicious of the numbers. So this is something to pay particular attention to. Behind all sense objects is Prakriti, the primal cause. Behind all subtle objects is Prakriti, the subtle cause. And so it is when we are able to identify all these things with Prakriti and her tools, the gunas, and say they are not me, that we are really reaching toward and beginning to achieve freedom. Behind all subtle objects is Prakriti, the primal cause. As we have already seen in studying Patanjali's picture of the universe, as we have already seen in studying Patanjali's picture of the universe, Prakriti is the elemental, undifferentiated stuff of matter. Matter, all universe is composed of matter and energy, is the elemental, undifferentiated stuff of matter, the energy by which all phenomena are projected. I'm going to read that again because this is the Swami's explanation of this extremely pregnant aphorism. As we have already seen in studying Patanjali's picture of the universe, Prakriti is the elemental, undifferentiated stuff of matter. And then he mentions not only matter, but the energy. The elemental, undifferentiated stuff of matter, the energy by which all phenomena are projected. As the meditative mind turns inward, it probes through the great gross outer coverings of things to their subtle essences. And beyond these subtle essences, it comes to Prakriti itself. But Prakriti is not the ultimate reality. Behind Prakriti is Brahman. The four kinds of samadhi already described are all within. Let me start that again. The four kinds of samadhi already described, savitarka, nirvitarka, savichara, nirvichara. The four kinds of samadhi already described are all within the realm of phenomena, and they are only preparations for that state of direct union with Brahman, which is the highest samadhi of all in this connection. But Prakriti is not the ultimate reality. Behind Prakriti or Maya or Divine Mother, it doesn't matter how you think of it, Shakti. Behind Prakriti is Brahman. The four kinds of samadhi already described are all within the realm of phenomena, and they are only preparations for that state of direct union with Brahman, which is the highest samadhi of all. In this connection, Sri Ramakrishna used to tell a parable. A disciple once came to a teacher to learn to meditate on God. The teacher gave him instructions, but the disciple soon returned and said that he could not carry them out. Every time he tried to meditate, he found himself thinking about his pet buffalo. Well then, said the teacher, you meditate on that buffalo you're so fond of. Every time I try to meditate, I find myself thinking about my pet buffalo. Well then, said the teacher, you meditate on that buffalo you're so fond of. The disciple shut himself up in a room and began to concentrate on the buffalo. After some days, the teacher knocked at his door and the disciple answered, Sir, I'm sorry, I can't come out to greet you. This door is too small. My horns will be in the way. Then the teacher smiled. Then the teacher smiled and said, "Splendid. You have become identified with the object of your concentration. Now, fix that concentration upon God, and you will easily succeed." So you can see why this is such a potent sutra. Anything at all about what was said or read?
I think, Brother Shankara, this is Haima.
Yes, I'm.
This parable is the proof that whatever we think inside our heads, that we manifest it. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we, exactly.
Even to total identification.
Exactly.
Now, Sri Ramakrishna actually had an experience very parallel to this, but he was often reluctant to tell of his own experiences, which is why he told this parable. Here was Sri Ramakrishna's experience. There was a farmer who lived nearby in Belur, who heard about the master and that the master was mad with love for all of the forms of the divine. This farmer came to him and said, "I've come to you for advice because I understand that you are mad with love for all of the forms of the divine. I cannot find that love within my heart for any form of the divine, divine with form or formless. I've tried, I find no correspondence there. Nothing arouses my love." And so Sri Ramakrishna asked him, "Well, what do you love?" And the farmer said, "Well, I have a pet goat. I raised this goat from just a tiny kid. I've just raised it up with, and I love my goat." And so then Sri Ramakrishna said, "Very well then, worship your goat." Now the farmer knew what he meant. He meant ritually worship his goat. In other words, prepare it special foods, make garlands and put it around his neck, paint the goat up in certain ways for certain special holy days within the Sanatana Dharma calendar, and so on. After 3 years, the farmer returned. And he bowed down to Sri Ramakrishna, and when he rose up, there were tears streaming down his face. And he said simply this, "Now I understand," and went away. Now, what did he understand? In the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, we find that Yajnavalkya was a great sage, an illumined soul. He had finished with his worldly life and was going to now go and be a vanaprastha, a forest dweller, leave his family behind. They were very well provided for. He wasn't leaving anyone in any dire straits. They were quite wealthy, as a matter of fact. But his wife Maitreyi said, "Well, wait a minute. This wealth and so on that you're leaving me, will it give me any happiness or satisfaction?" Yajnavalkya said, "No." "Well, then what will give me real happiness and understanding?" And so Yajnavalkya said, She says, tell me the truths that you know that will allow me to have this happiness. And Yajnavalkya tells her, and it's a long litany, but it starts with this. It is not for the sake of the husband that the wife loves the husband. It is for the sake of the self. It is not for the sake of the wife that the husband loves the wife. It is for the sake of the self. It is not for the sake of the children that the parents love the children. It is for the sake of the self. And then I say, as is so typical in the Upanishads, the list goes on for a long time so that our left mind can be convinced that there aren't any loopholes. And so what was Yajnavalkya pointing to? He was pointing to what the farmer found when for 3 years he worshipped his goat. He found the self in the goat. And having found the self in the goat, he could then see it everywhere. And so his love then became, rather than limited, it became unbounded. And that's the significance of this story of the water buffalo.
Question,
Yes, Robert.
When the story of, going back to the story of the buffalo,
Mm-hmm.
when the man was able to concentrate on the buffalo, I mean, his concentration was subtle. But when it got to the point that he was actually acting as if it was real, because he thought it was real, did it then become gross, or was it still gross in his mind?
Robert, I don't know the answer to that question. All we know is what the disciple said. I can't come out through the door because my horns are too large. So he had totally identified with the water buffalo.
Yeah.
He loved the buffalo and was totally identified with it. Whether he had actually transformed into the buffalo, the story doesn't say, and I don't know. But what does the teacher say? He doesn't question him about that. He just says, now stay in the room, and instead of fixing your mind on the water buffalo, fix your mind on God.
But my question was not really about that particular situation, but it was about any situation. If any of us had that experience, would that then be still subtle, or would it have transformed into a gross experience?
Robert, I can only ask you to contemplate on your own experience, which I know of as just a surpassingly good pianist and musician. When you meditate on some music, when you focus your attention on it, what happens? It doesn't want to remain inside, does it? No, it wants to express itself through your fingers on the piano. And so then you begin to do that. And so it becomes manifest. And you lose yourself entirely at times. I know this to be true because of what you've told me and what I've actually seen of you doing it.
But before you actually play it on the keyboard, while it's still in your mind, you can hear it, you can experience it.
Yes.
My question is it then gross, or is it still subtle?
That's subtle.
Until you actually play it.
It is all subtle until you actually play it.
That answers the question.
That's it. It remains subtle as
regardless of how real it seems to you.
Well, the reality, is it
Seems.
real? Of course it is real, Robert. Of course it is real. It's just a different kind of real when you bring it out and actually put it through your fingers onto the keyboard. It's just a different kind of real, very satisfyingly real. And it's one that you can share. There's no way that you can share that inner reality. But that inner reality can deepen and deepen when you turn your attention from music to that which makes music. You can say, all right, now I'm going to turn my attention to the mother of muses, Saraswati, and I'm going to, instead of thinking about what she creates, I'm going to meditate on herself. Then, in a subtle sense, you become Saraswati, and you may actually, we see this in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, you may actually act it out as, and those people who have become totally identified with Jesus Christ, the saints, it's said they begin to look like him. Padre Pio is a modern example. You can read this, and there's a motion picture, a biopic, if you will, of Padre Pio. He began to resemble Christ physically, including the stigmata that were real. He had bleeding holes in both hands and both feet, and he had a wound in his side. And this, the Vatican sent what is called a devil's advocate to disprove. It was his job to disprove these things of Padre Pio, that this was some trick that he was playing in order to glorify himself. Instead, that devil's advocate became convinced and reverent of Padre Pio, and that's why he became, he's now been beatified. So just to what extent it becomes gross, we only have these hints and allegations. But you know in your own life what happens when the music goes from subtle to gross.
That's walking on the razor's edge for sure.
Oh, absolutely, brother. Could it be otherwise? Otherwise, what fun would it be? If it was a broad and easy path to walk, what fun would that be? We need these challenges of learning to control our attention and therefore our behavior. And so it becomes a joy rather than a burden.
Thank you.
Thank you, dear. Thank you for asking that question.
Brother Shankara, this is Haima. I have a comment for Robert's question of buffalo and thing. I just want to, I have a thought. It's an immersion. The person who was on pet buffalo thinking about it, he just got so immersed in it and he started feeling like that. It's not like he doesn't become like a buffalo. Like when we meditate, we reach to a different level. Like slowly, transcendence starts happening and then ego drops out. Then you don't react and then you start responding to people with calmness and without any agitation. That doesn't mean we are gods, but we manifest a little bit of divineness within us. That's what I was thinking. And the pet buffalo story, he almost got immersed in it with the pet buffalo. And that immersion.
Haima Didi, I'm going to leave you to argue this out with.
I was just thinking that. Yeah, no argument.
No, I'm not arguing with you myself. What do I know to argue with you? I'm just saying, I'll leave you to argue this out with Vivekananda himself, who says we do indeed become the gods that we are.
Wow. Yeah.
And you can see at the end of his Raja Yoga, he describes just exactly how godlike we become. We become omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. That's what he says. So, like I say, I'll leave you to argue it out with him, because I don't think you're speaking at cross purposes. I just think that he has a more expansive view of it.
I agree that. Yeah. Thank you so much, Brother Shankara.
Thank you, dear.
Thanks, Robert.
Shankara.
Yes, dear.
Amadas here. If I
Am-
may, I'd like to offer that from my neurophysiologist part of me, that the amygdala, which is the main organelle of the limbic system,
Mhm.
when we work even in our imagination, when there's enough detail in the imagination of characteristics and attributes, the amygdala will treat it as if it's real.
Yes.
That's why guided meditation works.
Yes.
And that's the part of ourselves that just from my humble perspective, that's the part of ourselves that's the part of myself that I intend to convince myself that I am what you just said, Vivekananda said about us, that we are that omniscient, omnipotent, ever luminous soul.
Yes. And it's why sports psychologists will tell a baseball player, when you come up to bat and you're the third out and you must not strike out, don't say to yourself, I must not strike out, don't strike out, because your brain doesn't hear don't.
Yes.
It hears strike out. Instead say, I've come up here to get a hit. I've come up here to get a hit. And that's what your brain then hears, and your body behaves accordingly. And
and we gather the whole of ourselves behind that thought, that intention.
Yes.
I agree. Thank you.
And again, read Jill Bolte Taylor about this in My Stroke of Insight. The power of your intention is vast. When she is now asked, when Jill Bolte Taylor is now asked, who are you? Her answer, simple-heartedly and straightforwardly, is, I am a being as big as the universe. Now, how big is the universe? If we understand it correctly, it is infinite. And its qualities are infinite. So I'm so looking forward in August, and you'll hear from me about it in the fall. I'm so looking forward to reading her new book called Whole Brain Living, which addresses some of the things that Amadas just brought to our attention. So it's now almost 12:15.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
Just a quick couple of comments. The first is more in a lighter vein. I don't know if anybody else has heard it, but I've heard it said that when a couple live together for many, many years, they actually physically start resembling each other.
It's true. This is not just folk wisdom, it's true. Like a lot of folk wisdom. Same thing happens with owners and their pets.
And the second thing was, I think I heard this in one of Swami Sarvapriyananda's talk, that when after enlightenment, when Buddha came out and started coming in front of people, he was asked by someone, not who are you, but what are you? Because he had such a glow and whatever it's described. And I believe the answer was, I am, I'm forgetting that part, I'm the enlightened one or something like that. I forgot, but that's what he was asked. What are you?
Well, shoot, dear, find out and tell us tomorrow.
Okay.
Because I want to know what he said. I don't know. I don't know that story.
Okay. I will next time I will write down when I come across that.
Yeah. Yeah, find it out. I mean it. If you join us tomorrow for our open forum, say this is leftover from yesterday. Here's what the Buddha said.
Okay.
Because the Buddha, as Vivekananda said, the Buddha is the ultimate karma yogi.
This is Jeff. I think he said, "I am awake."
He did.
Wasn't that the answer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think you're right. He said, "I'm the awakened one."
Yes. Yes, I am awake. Tathagata.
Now we don't have to wait till tomorrow.
Well, okay. I'm glad. I think you're right. I now remember Swami Swahananda saying something about this. I am Tathagata. I am the awakened one. Anything else from anyone? Oh, this has been so dear. So in September, we'll take up the beginning of a new series of sutras. That is to say, it's symbolized by the number 46 or 1. So it's very auspicious that we ended with 45, and that in September, when we take it up, which will be September 7th, I think. Is that right? I don't remember. No, Wednesday is the 7th. Yeah, Tuesday is the 6th. Wednesday is the 7th. So whatever that is, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, the 10th, I guess.
Brother Shankara, the first Saturday in September will be the 3rd.
The 3rd. Okay, so it'll be the 3rd. So it'll be September the 3rd. We'll take up this Sutra 46. Any thoughts or final thoughts or comments by anyone? All right, dears. Jai, jai, jai. Oh, dearly beloved, a flower at your feet for each one who comes to your open door. A flower at your feet for each one who stands by your open door and says, "Come to me, offering to break this world's chain that binds us down to ignorance, suffering, and death. A flower at your feet for each one who takes the path that you have struck through this, your jungle world. Om Amen. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace and beneficence be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. And may we go forward in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Mother and Father. Any final thought from any of you? Okay.
Brother, I wish you a happy and restful month off.
Thank you, dear.
Yes.
I don't intend to have so much rest as change. There are 4 books that I intend to read. I hope to get out an edition of a publication for which I'm coordinating editor, and I hope to do some writing. So it'll be restful in the sense of a change is as good as whatever it says. So those are my intentions. We'll see. As it is said, if you want to make God laugh, just make a plan. So we'll see whether there's a chuckle up God's sleeve about what's really going to happen in August. In any event, so good to talk with all of you. There'll be this final opportunity for us to gather together tomorrow for the open forum on Karma Yoga. I do hope that all of you will make the effort to attend. Whether you say anything or not is absolutely immaterial. Your presence and the current of your being is known to us, whether we bring it to consciousness or not. It's known to us. So please join us for the open forum tomorrow on Karma Yoga. A worksheet was attached to the newsletter. If you don't receive the newsletter, you can find it on the website or through the Facebook page. It's a one-page worksheet that just gives you the concepts that we're going to review in the beginning, so that we have a context in which we're considering what Karma Yoga is and means to us. So until tomorrow morning, for those of you who do in fact join us, Jai, 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 Shri Ramakrishna, Jai Ma, and blessings. And away we go.